Parents asked that I give my golden child sister the $30,000 that I had saved for college so that she could purchase an apartment. I'm 19 years old and now a college student. My connection with my family has always been tense, owing to our differences. I worked hard to get where I am now, keeping outstanding grades and even receiving a college scholarship. I expected my efforts to finally gain me some respect, but that was not the case. My parents have always preferred my sister. She is pampered, entitled, and accustomed to having her way. It's been obvious to me for a long time that they see her as the golden kid, while I am just the responsible one who is supposed to manage things on my own. Every time she makes a mistake, I have to pick up the pieces or make sacrifices for her. Over the years, I saved approximately $30,000 for education. This wasn't simple. I acquired the most of it via part-time work and scholarships. This money is everything to me. It is my passport to a self-sufficient future. However, to my parents, it seemed to be simply another resource to tap from when my sister needed money. My sister Sarah is 24, but you wouldn't know it by the way she behaves. She has been coddled her whole life, always receiving what she wants without having to move a finger. She is now jobless and has been for quite some time. She claimed to be working things out, but she really spends her time lying about doing nothing. Despite this, she has decided that she needs a new apartment, something luxurious in a great area of town. Of course, she doesn't have any money or income to cover it. One evening, my parents sat me down and informed me that Sarah had found the ideal apartment but didn't have enough money for the deposit. They requested that I pay up my whole college funds of $30,000 to assist her get the apartment. I was stunned. They didn't ask, they commanded. Then came the kicker. If I refused, they told me I could pack my belongings and go. They made it plain that their first priority was Sarah's comfort, not my future. They did not stop there. My mother used the family comes first card, and my father muttered something about Sarah always being there for me, which is a total lie. They attempted to guilt me, claiming that if I were a nice brother, I would do this without hesitation. The emotional manipulation was powerful. At first, I was unable to talk. Their demand caught me totally off guard. I wondered how they could possibly believe it was right to take all I'd worked for and give it to Sarah, who hadn't done anything to improve herself. My father just shrugged and claimed it was about keeping the family together. My mother said something about Sarah needing this flat more than I needed my money. That's when I realized that no matter what I said, they weren't going to listen. They didn't care about fairness. They only cared about Sarah. Over the following 2 days, I was a wreck, continuously assessing my alternatives. I considered simply giving in to avoid getting booted out. However, the more I thought about it, the more I understood how incorrect it was. Why should I have to give up all I'd worked for just because my sister couldn't be bothered to take care of herself? However, holding my stance meant jeopardizing everything. I had nowhere to go if they booted me out. I was on my own. I pondered contacting some extended family members, but I knew it wouldn't help. Most of them were as captivated by Sarah's performance as my parents were. I felt stuck, like if no matter what I did, I'd lose something crucial. Finally, I resolved I would not allow them push me about. I began investigating my legal rights. I understood that as an adult, they couldn't just take my money without my permission. I also made sure to keep all of my crucial paperwork, such as my birth certificate, passport, and bank information, safe in case anything went wrong. I even began secretly collecting some of my possessions and relocating them to a friend's apartment in case I needed to escape quickly. I knew I needed to be ready for the worst-case scenario, getting booted out with nowhere to go. So I contacted my college's housing administration to see if they had any emergency arrangements available. They didn't, but they did refer me to several local resources that may assist. Oh, it was not much, but it was something. When I eventually addressed my parents, I remained strong. I told them I was not going to give up my money and that if they truly wanted to throw me out over this, I was prepared to go. My father was upset, accusing me of being selfish and disrespectful. My mother burst into tears, stating she couldn't believe I was prepared to break up our family for a little sum of money. If it was so inexpensive, why don't they pay for it? Of course, Sarah pitched a tantrum. She yelled that I was wrecking her life and didn't care about her happiness. My parents just stood there, looking at me and waited for me to back down, but I did not. I informed them that if they wanted me gone, I'd go by the end of the week. The next several days were horrible. My parents seldom talked to me, and when they did, it was simply to instill more guilt in me. My mother began giving me the quiet treatment, while my father resorted to making sarcastic remarks whenever I entered the room. Sarah refused to look at me, as if I had personally betrayed her. They continued up the threats and emotional blackmail, attempting to wear me down. Despite the harsh atmosphere, I continued to prepare to depart. I covertly relocated the remainder of my possessions to my friend's home and made plans to stay with them temporarily if necessary. I also contacted several other pals to let them know what was happening. They provided their support and even advised I consider legal action if things worsened. The breaking point came one morning when I discovered that my parents had attempted to access my bank account. They believed they could just grab the money and deal with the consequences later. But I was a step ahead of them. I had already drained and terminated the account. When they learned what I had done, they were furious. My father raged at me, calling me ungrateful and claiming that I was ruining the family. My mother simply sobbed and asked how I could do this to them, but I did not back down. I told them they'd gone too far and that I'd had enough of being their scapegoat. If they wanted me out, I'd leave, but they wouldn't receive a penny of my money. I realized that leaving quietly would just allow them to twist the tale whatever they wanted, so I decided to take control of the narrative. I shared a thorough description of what transpired on social media. I described everything, including how they attempted to compel me to give up my funds, the threats, and the emotional manipulation. I also shared images of their communications and bank alerts indicating their efforts to access my account. To ensure that the message was sent, I tagged not just my parents and sister, but also some of their acquaintances and extended relatives. I wanted everyone to understand the truth. Their response was swift and tremendous. Most people were on my side, providing support and criticizing my parents and sister for their actions. Some of my extended relatives contacted me, startled and dismayed by what they had learned. They had no clue things were that horrible. A few individuals, especially my parents' close friends, attempted to defend them, but their words were drowned out by the condemnation. The word spread quickly. My parents' co-workers and acquaintances began to distance themselves, and I learned that Sarah's plans for a new apartment were thwarted when the landlord learned of what was going on. She was enraged, blaming me for wrecking her life, but I knew they'd all brought it on themselves. The consequences were devastating for my parents. Their carefully constructed picture of the ideal family was destroyed. My father's professional ties deteriorated as his colleagues started to perceive him in a new light. My mother, who took pleasure in her social position, found herself gently banished from her normal groups. And Sarah, she had lost her opportunity at the apartment she desired so much, and no one was rushing to give her another. Following the showdown, I moved in with a helpful buddy. It was not perfect, but it was preferable than living in that hazardous atmosphere. Adjusting to independence was difficult, but it felt liberating. I could finally concentrate on my academics and career without being concerned about what my relatives might attempt to steal from me next. My parents did not handle the aftermath well. They bombarded my phone with calls and texts, alternating between threats and urgent requests for me to remove the post and return home. They even attempted to spin the story, stating that I had overreacted and that they were only trying to get Sarah out of a difficult position. However, it was too late. Everyone knew the truth. I chose to take a strong no-contact approach. I blocked them across all platforms and ensured they couldn't contact me. I also obtained legal counsel about maybe obtaining a restraining order if they would not back down. The choice was not easy, but it was essential. I couldn't let them pull me down any longer. In the aftermath, a few estranged relatives came out, offering their assistance and apologizing for not getting involved sooner. My institution even gave me more financial help after learning about my predicament, which was a big comfort. Throughout it all, I've developed a lot. I'm more confident and self-sufficient than ever before. My academic performance has really increased because I'm no longer anxious about my family. I've also met new friends and established a reliable support network. Looking forward, I'm determined to achieve total financial freedom. I'm also really thinking about breaking connections with my family for good. The cycle of poison has lasted long enough, and I'm determined to end it. It will not be easy, but I am determined to create a better future for myself, one in which I am not always looking over my shoulder, waiting for the next betrayal. So Reddit, Ida, for refusing to give over my college money to my sister and going public about what my family attempted to do to me. Update 1. It's been nearly 3 months since I first shared my experience, and a lot has transpired. I'd want to thank everyone for their support and guidance. It truly helped me through some difficult times. Things became very chaotic once I moved out and told everyone what had occurred. My parents and Sarah did not take it well. They continued attempting to reach me, alternating between furious threats and guilt trips. I stuck to my no-contact rule, but it wasn't easy. About a week after I departed, my mother arrived at my friend's house where I was living. I have no clue how she discovered where I was. She was weeping and pleading for me to return home, claiming they had made a mistake and wanted to make things right. I almost felt awful for her, but then she began talking about how I was ripping the family apart and how Sarah was suffering as a result of my actions. That's when I realized nothing had really changed. I warned her to leave or I'd contact the cops. She fled, but not before declaring I had broken her heart. The following day, my father phoned the institution to inquire about my courses and timetable. Fortunately, I had previously spoken with the administration about my predicament, so they did not offer him anything, but the fact that he was attempting to locate me in such a manner terrified me. Sarah began showing up in locations she knew. I frequented the library, a coffee shop near campus, and even outside some of my lectures. She'd attempt to corner me, alternately shouting at me for destroying her life and pleading with me to give her the money. It became so severe that I had to adjust my schedule and ask friends to walk with me between courses. About a month after leaving, I received a call from my aunt, my mother's sister. She stated she wanted to meet and discuss. I was reluctant, but she had always treated me well, so I decided to meet her in a public spot. When I arrived, I discovered that my parents had put her up to it and were hidden at a neighboring table waiting for me. I felt very deceived. I left quickly and disabled my aunt's phone number. The social media backlash continued. My parents attempted damage management by presenting their own version of events, stating I was a problematic child who stole money from them and fled. Some individuals believed them, but the majority saw through it. It was difficult to watch family friends and distant relatives take sides, but I was thankful to those who supported me. Sarah took it to another level. She launched a GoFundMe account, saying she was a victim of financial abuse and needed assistance to leave a toxic familial environment. She included my name in it, distorting the tale to make it seem as if I was the abuser. I had to hire a lawyer to have the campaign taken down. Speaking of attorneys, my parents threatened to take legal action against me. They said I owed them money for raising me and that they were entitled to my savings. It was ludicrous, yet it worried me enough to need legal help. The lawyer told me that they had no case, but encouraged me to continue recording everything just in case. About 2.5 months after I left, I received a surprise email from Sarah's ex-boyfriend, Jack. They had split up a few months before all of this occurred, and I had always felt he was a kind person who got drawn into my family's turmoil. He apologized for not reaching out sooner and expressed his support. I was astonished by what Jack told me about Sarah. Apparently, she had been cheating on him throughout their relationship, often with men who could give her extravagant presents or take her on vacation. He said she was always complaining about how she deserved a more affluent living and how unfair it was that she had to work for anything. It gave me a fresh perspective on her actions. I also learned from Jack that Sarah had been sacked from her last job for theft. My parents had covered it up by paying back what she had taken to prevent the corporation from filing charges. I was upset that they had done this while asking me to give up my hard-earned money. About 3 months after I departed, I received a phone call from an unfamiliar number. It turned out to be my grandpa, my father's father. We were never close. He resided in another state and we only saw him every few years. He said that he had heard about what occurred from a cousin and wanted to hear my side of the story. I was skeptical at first considering what occurred with the anti-trusted, but as we spoke, I saw he was truly worried. He informed me that he had his own troubles with my father over the years and was not shocked by what had occurred. He apologized for not being more involved in my life and promised to assist me financially if I needed it. I was moved by his offer, but I told him I wanted to do it on my own. He appreciated my decision, but said that the offer would remain if I changed my mind. It meant a lot to have relatives on my side. The talk with my grandpa piqued my interest in other family members I'd lost contact with. I contacted a few of relatives on my mother's side who had always gotten along well. Megan, one of them, told me she'd had problems with my parents and Sarah in the past. Megan told me something that made me really furious since I didn't know about it while living with them. A few years back, she was going through a difficult divorce and needed a place to stay for a few weeks. My parents had first offered to let her stay with them, but Sarah objected since she didn't want Megan in her space. Megan was booted out by my parents after just 3 days, forcing her to sleep on friends' sofas until she could find an apartment. I couldn't believe they would do that to my family while insisting that I give up everything for Sarah. Throughout all of this, I was still attempting to sort out my living situation. My friend's parents graciously allowed me to stay with them, but I realized it wouldn't be a long-term solution. I began searching for an inexpensive apartment near university, but everything was out of my budget. A few days later, I saw one of Sarah's pals in the grocery store. She attempted to guilt-trip me, claiming Sarah's depression was all my responsibility. I inquired whether Sarah had given her the whole thing. She stated that she only knew Sarah's version. I told her my side of the story, and I could see skepticism seeping into her countenance. She departed looking perplexed, and I felt a little feeling of accomplishment. The following day, the bank called me. Someone attempted to access my new account using my social security number. So the bank had identified it as a suspicious action and stopped it. I realized instantly that it had to be my parents. I filed a police complaint and began the process of freezing my credit. I was shocked by how far they were ready to go. I felt it was time to take some real action. I went back to the lawyer I had previously seen and began the process of obtaining a restraining order against my parents and Sarah. It was a severe action, but I thought I had no other option. My mother called me panicked the day before the restraining order hearing. She was weeping, claiming she had heard about the hearing and begged me not to go forward with it. She said it would devastate the family and ruin their life. I told her they should have considered of it before attempting to steal from and harass me, then hung up. The hearing was stressful. My parents and Sarah arrived there with their own lawyer. They attempted to portray me as an ungrateful, disturbed child who was striking out at his beloved parents. But I had evidence, messages, emails, social media postings, and bank records. The court saw through their charade and issued the restraining order. Sarah approached me one more time as I was leaving the courtroom after the hearing. She looked dreadful, as if she had not slept. She began to apologize, but then her expression contorted and she spat. "I hope you're happy now that you've ruined all of our lives." A bailiff intervened and dragged her away. This was the last time I saw her. I'm also searching for a part-time job to assist with my living costs. It's difficult to balance employment and education, yet it feels amazing to be entirely autonomous. I am determined to make it on my own. I won't lie, it's been a difficult few months. Some days I miss having a family, even if it was dysfunctional. Holidays are particularly difficult, so that's where things are today. I'm still absorbing everything that has occurred, but I'm going on. Final update. It's been over a year since my previous update, and I can't believe how much has changed. I would want to thank everyone for their ongoing support during this journey. Your encouragement has meant more than you realize. After the restraining order hearing, everything was quiet for a time. I assumed my family had finally received the message, but you know what they say about the quiet before the storm. About 3 months ago, I received an unexpected call from my uncle, my father's brother. We had never been close, but he seemed really worried. He informed me that things had gotten out of hand with my parents and Sarah. Sarah had apparently gotten connected with some unscrupulous individuals and owed them a large sum of money. My parents, in their wonderful wisdom, had taken out a second mortgage on the property to attempt to repay her bills, but it wasn't enough. One night, the folks Sarah owed money to came up to my parents' home. Things became nasty. My uncle did not know all of the facts, but he did say the police were involved and my father ended up in the hospital with a fractured arm. This is when things become extremely messy. My parents, despite everything, continued to attempt to protect Sarah. They told the cops it was a random break-in. However, news spread across the family about what had really transpired. A few days after my uncle's call, I began receiving texts from my parents again. I unblocked them since they were still my parents, a major mistake. They begged me to return home, claiming they needed my assistance. They also attempted to shame me by claiming that if I had just given them the money when they requested, none of this would have occurred. Can you believe it? They're still attempting to make this my fault somehow. I disregarded their texts. I've also saved enough money to move out of my friend's home and into a nicer apartment in a more safe building. It's a little farther from campus, but the peace of mind makes it worthwhile. But then Sarah arrived to my residence, disregarding the restraining order. I'm not sure how she found out where I live, since I had just relocated there. She was a mess, screaming, pleading for money, and claiming she was in danger. I warned her to leave or I'd contact the police. She yelled that I was murdering her and that whatever happened to her would be my responsibility. It was terrible. I immediately phoned my lawyer, and we are in the process of extending the restraining order to encompass my present residence. I've also had to notify my landlord and neighbors of the issue, just in case Sarah or my parents do anything. On top of all this turmoil, I learned from other family members that my parents have been telling everyone that I'm the one who got Sarah in trouble. They allege I introduced her to these shady individuals, and that I also owe them money. It's pure nonsense. Yet some relatives believe it. I had to ban a lot of individuals on social media due to the horrible remarks I was receiving. I've also made some excellent pals in the last year. They've become like a chosen family for me. We're even arranging a party together. Regarding my parents and Sarah, I've heard via the grapevine that they're facing foreclosure on their home. A part of me feels sorry for them, but a larger portion understands that they brought this on themselves. I can't help but wonder how different things might have been if they had simply respected my limits and treated me decently. So that is where things stand right now. Thank you everyone for your continued support along this adventure. I could not have done it without you.
Did you hear? Jackson's weekly poker night is actually a book club. But he's too embarrassed to admit he loves reading romance novels.